Welcome back. I'm Ed Morrissey of hotair.com, filling in for Drew today, taking your calls at 888-914-9149. That's 888-914-9149. Lots of things happening, though, in Austin, Texas today. A dramatic end to the Austin bombing series, we hope, with the suspect apparently dying in a self-detonated explosion, either accidental or purposeful. And to find out more about that, we're going to talk to Mike Toth, who is special counsel on the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's executive team and a major in the U.S. Marine Corps. He's handled numerous cases challenging federal regulations that threaten harm to Texas businesses and residents. And he has also been following the case of the Austin bomber very closely, as have we all, Mike. I mean, this is a story that has pretty much gripped the nation since probably the second bombing. It's such an unusual thing to have happen. It's gotten tons of attention.
It absolutely has, and of course we appreciate your interest, your prayers, the prayers of your listeners. I know I spoke on the radio program on Monday, the day before the events that brought this chapter to an end, and we certainly, as an office and as a state, appreciated the support that we got from all over the country. And, this was just an example of incredible collaborative work. It was an example of the Texas spirit of law enforcement and the great residents from throughout the state banding together and, working through what was a very difficult situation.
A difficult, terrifying situation. I know that the federal government said that there was no known nexus to terrorism. I know what they meant by that. They meant international terrorism, overseas terrorism, non-domestic terrorism. But I mean, clearly, when you set bombs off randomly, and especially when you're talking about one of the more recent bombings, which was a tripwire bomb that was set up on a sidewalk that badly injured two men who just happened to be walking down the sidewalk. I mean, that's a form of terrorism, no matter how you cut it, right, Mike?
These actions, really terrified the entire state of Texas and the community of Austin. Absolutely. And our hearts went out to all the victims and to all the residents of Austin immediately after the first bomb. And we went into overdrive to try to get to the bottom of this, as did the governor's office. Governor Abbott, as always, leaned into this, chipped in some extra money for some X-ray materials. We had DPS, local police, and obviously federal officers all flooding the zone, working together seamlessly. And, this was another great example of, the power of focused law enforcement and forensics and technology and the people of Texas. We opened up a tip line and we received thousands of tips. And there was also an outreach to witnesses around the different drop zones once that last FedEx package was tracked. And so the involvement of the people of Texas, along with the great work of law enforcement working together, and our excellent statewide leadership from the governor's office, the attorney general's office, and other offices, really working together to protect our citizenry against these horrific attacks. And while we are obviously breathing a sigh of relief, it's a cautious relief. We're still vigilant. We do not know exactly the motives of the bomber. We also don't know if he planted other bombs. So there's definitely still a sense of vigilance throughout state government here in Austin, from our leaders, from governor's office, the attorney general's office, the local police who were just so heroic in working through this investigation, are continuing their investigation, and they're also counseling for a high level of vigilance, in the event that there are other bombs that either have been planted or en route.
Mike, let's take this from the top here, because I do want to get to the rapid nature of how this case was concluded, because I found that amazing. But before we get there, I want to kind of start at the top. This is it's a crime which gripped the nation in large part because it's very unusual. You don't see a lot of this. I mean, I think the one thing that I can think of that is even the closest analog to this was the Unabomber, and that was stopped 20-something years ago. And you just don't see that type of thing going on too much. Perhaps the Olympic bomber and in the early 1990s, who set off 2 or 3 different devices, and it's just so unusual to see this type of thing that I'm sure, especially when you're dealing with somebody who at least initially wasn't using any sort of delivery infrastructure, formal delivery infrastructure, that it's a difficult case to grasp just because of its unique nature.
Absolutely, and the sophistication and the randomness of the attacks as well. It began with 2 bombs in East Austin, and then we had the tripwire device set off in Southwest Austin, a different part of town, late Sunday evening. So the randomness and the sophistication, obviously gave significant pause and added to, the horrific nature of these attacks. But I think back to, the amazing law enforcement work here. If you think about the Unabomber, it was well over a decade before the Unabomber was tracked down. In this case, this was very, very, very quick police work. And, during the course of this investigation, the people of Texas really banded together. I think you saw something that was very reminiscent of Texans working together through Hurricane Harvey, where you have, individuals in a state who understand that, when we're under pressure, when we're in a really difficult situation, we need to turn to each other and find a way through it.
What I think, when I was reviewing this, we're speaking with Mike Toth, special counsel, and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's executive team in Texas. And when he started using FedEx, the FedEx thing was just a couple days ago, right? The FedEx explosion, I think, was 2 days ago, maybe 3 days ago. And
right.
And when he did that, I was thinking to myself, that takes a lot of arrogance, because and hubris, which is what I really thought it was, because it makes it a lot easier to track somebody when they're starting to use formal delivery systems in order to send out the bombs. And you mentioned the Unabomber. The Unabomber sent it by mail, which is a little, there's not a lot of tracking on U.S. mail. There's some security measures on that. There's also they also offer tracking, which they didn't do during when the Unabomber was or didn't widely offer it during the Unabomber's run. But to use FedEx, which is basically famously tracks every package, to me it was either a real sign that this person was either desperate or really thought he was smarter than law enforcement, than FedEx, than all of these, UPS or whoever else he ended up using. I said to myself, this has got to be, the beginning of the end here for this guy, because it's going to be very easy to figure out where that package came from. And actually, even at that point, Mike, I was surprised it was that easy to find out where the package came from.
Right, and as this case turned out, it was that 6th bomb and the FedEx aspect of it that really cracked the case or gave a significant amount of information to law enforcement officers. From there, they were able to look at information as to various drop-off points, information I've heard in reports about the bomber's cell phone number, which is obviously going to help in tracking the bomber himself, and then extensive surveillance footage around the different drop-off points, and as well as witnesses around there. And again, we see really here just the amazing advancements in technology that we now have really at our fingertips, that are integrated into the American economy, into American business, and just the leverage that law enforcement gets, from having those kinds of technological resources at our fingerprints, ultimately to keep us safe. I think beyond that, you see the incredible advancements in forensics. There are experts out there who point out that to the layperson, these bombs all kind of look the same. But to the experts that we have protecting us and the forensic tools that they now have available to them, they're able to track and trace and link together the various different devices that this bomber used to kill and to terrorize the city of Austin.
And this is, of course, part of the reason why you were able to determine that the tripwire bomb was the same bomber who set the packages on doorsteps who also used FedEx. It was the same bomb construction. It was just different delivery methods. And that does help you make sure that what you're not dealing with here is 2 or 3 different bombers going at the same time. As statistically improbable as that might be, law enforcement has to consider that when these things are going on.
Absolutely. All the stones need to be overturned. And as you mentioned, Ed, police currently believe that he created all the bombs that were used. At the same time, police are still looking into whether the suspect had any accomplices. And, of course, they're looking into the motive for the attacks.
Well, we're talking with Mike Toth, special counsel for Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's executive team. And when we come back, let's talk a little bit more about the bomber himself, what we know, what we don't know. And we'll take your calls at 888-914-9149, 888-914-9149. Definitely want to hear from you. If you're in the Austin area, we'd like to hear about how the experience has impacted you in that community. I'm Ed Morrissey from hotair.com, filling in for Drew Mariani. We'll be right back.
Live, coast to coast, the Drew Mariani Show is on Relevant Radio.
Put it on your calendar. That is a great way to recommit to praying the rosary. The second thing I recommend is download the Relevant Radio app. If I'm in the car and I'm busy, I just know that I can pray along with the app. You have a lot of different types of rosaries. One being a little quicker, another one with music, and a different tempo for kind of where you're at as you're beginning to recommit to daily prayer.
The Relevant Radio app. Listen to and pray the rosary on your schedule.
Prayer is powerful. This is Joe Sikora, and prayer to God through the Blessed Mother is even more powerful. Let's pray right now for an end to abortion in our country. Let's pray 100 million memoraries this year for an end to abortion and the protection of human life from the moment of conception to natural death. If we pray 1 memorare an hour, we'll reach our goal by the end of the year. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen.
Add your memoraries to the tally at relevantradio.com/mom.
What is causing you anxiety?
It's actually my son, because he knows if he does not accept Christ as a Savior, he is going to hell.
It's the Joe Sikora Show.
How are you modeling God's love and grace in his life?
That's a tough one.
Jesus presented them with himself, and it was his love, it was his calm, it was his willingness to meet people exactly where they were. That's what transformed lives.
Give Joe a call.
Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Pacific and 9 to 11 Eastern.
The Relevant Radio toll-free studio line is sponsored by Catholic Order of Foresters. Information about their flexible premium life insurance plans available at relevantradio.com/Forester.
We began following the vehicle, again, waiting to get the tactical vehicles here so we could take this, make a stop. However, the vehicle ended up stopping as members of the Austin Police Department SWAT team approached the vehicle. The suspect detonated a bomb inside the vehicle.
It's the Drew Mariani Show on Relevant Radio.
Welcome back. I'm Ed Morrissey of hotair.com, filling in for Drew today, taking your calls at 888-914-9149, 888-914-9149. Before we go on, let's listen to a little bit more of what Police Chief Manley had to say at that press conference from NBC4 that we just heard.
This is the culmination of 3 very long weeks for our community. And throughout these weeks, we've talked about the importance of remaining vigilant and looking out for each other. I want to continue that message as we stand here this morning, though. We still need to remain vigilant to ensure that no other packages or devices have been left through the community. So as we go through the day today, we want the community to remain vigilant, but I also want to look at where we are now in Round Rock and remind our neighboring communities of Round Rock and Cedar Park and the other cities that we do not know where he has been in the past 24 hours, and we need your communities to remain vigilant as well. And again, if you see something that looks suspicious, if you see something that's out of place, if you see something that gives you concern, call 911 and let us know so that we don't experience any more tragedies in our communities, because we've had far too many over the past 3 weeks.
If you see something, say something, probably never made more sense than it does right now in and around the communities of Austin, Texas. We have Mike Toth, special counsel from the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's executive team, on the line with us talking about this right now. And Mike, tell us a little bit about the bomber himself. We know who he is. We know his name. And I'm not sure how much else we actually know about this now deceased perpetrator.
Sure. His name, he's been identified as Mark Condit. He was either 23 or 24 years old. He was local. And, I think the most important thing that remains to be determined by law enforcement is exactly what his motive was, what the motive was behind these terrible attacks.
And one of the ways that we would normally do that would be to take a look at his social media accounts. And you mentioned this briefly in the previous segment, Mike, but at least from what people have been able to determine so far, it doesn't look like he had a large social media footprint, which is unusual for a young man of his age. Normally you would see them being all over social media, much more so than older people such as myself. And so lives are usually open books for this particular generation, for the millennials out there. So it's a little unusual, at least for the moment, that we don't see more of that footprint out there, isn't it?
Right. I guess another source of information, though, and I know there's been quite a bit of coverage of this up until now, and this is something that law enforcement is definitely looking into, is the fact that he had two roommates. And right. From what we have gathered thus far, it appears that the suspect's roommates are cooperating with the police. So I think that also may provide a rich source of information for investigators, who are, after these terrible events of the past 3 weeks, trying to get to the bottom of this and trying to see exactly what triggered these terrible attacks against people of Austin.
And, of course, where the bombs were built, because if he was living with two other people, if they saw anything, if they didn't see anything, where some of the other materials might be and whether or not we can prevent people from getting access to those are also important things to determine.
Yeah, absolutely, Ed, and that's a great point that you make. We are in a state of continued vigilance here in Austin, and that's really a result of a few unanswered questions, obviously the motivations, whether or not there were accomplices, whether or not there are still bombs that are planted throughout the greater Austin area, whether or not there are boxes of bombs that are in transit, and also where these bombs that have already gone off were created. Where was that location? So, these are some of the issues that obviously law enforcement continues to work hard on, and that we continue to need information on from anyone in the public who has seen something, who knows something, just as we received such great public participation when we were looking for information prior to finding the bomber. Obviously, we still need good information is still in high demand as we're really into the next chapter of the investigation. Now that we know who the bomber was, the details surrounding these attacks are going to be very important for law enforcement to get to the bottom of.
Exactly. We're speaking with Mike Toth, special counsel for Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's executive team. Let's go to the phones. Let's talk to Rose in Round Rock, Texas, right there on the scene. Rose, welcome to the show. Great to speak with you today.
Well, thank you. I guess the overwhelming feeling is not feeling safe, but also just really deep sadness for the loss of lives, and right. Including the young man who did these things, and his deep sadness for his family, and we're praying for all of them. And it's just it's just a weird feeling, not feeling safe, and living in Round Rock and being next door to Pflugerville, where he was from originally. But my hearts go out to all the people who lost family members and people who are injured from the attacks.
Well, Rose, thank you very much. And I know that I think that we all join you in those prayers. And I know, Mike, you were thanking people on Relevant Radio for their continued prayers throughout this entire crisis. And those prayers are still needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, these attacks were just wanton attacks against the intrinsic dignity of human life. And that continued all the way through last night. The bomber ultimately detonated a bomb that killed himself, and it could have harmed a lot of other people as well. So I think throughout this process, we really saw just how precious life is, and how important it is for the community and for law enforcement to take the value of life so seriously. I mean, it really is what we have here, and I think that's why we saw across the board just a great amount of support through prayer and through people being interested in what was happening here on the ground in Austin, and then the willingness of the leaders of Texas, from the governor's office to the attorney general's office, and then obviously the federal government helping Austin police going round the clock to get to the bottom of this. It was because, this really strikes at the heart of what we have, and that's a great life that we have here.
Mike, we got a question from another listener about the exotic batteries. We've heard about the exotic batteries and how it was more or less the signature for this particular bomber. Can you tell us what the batteries were, why they're exotic, and why that played such a key role in the investigation?
It's the investigation has been a very fluid process, and our investigators from across, the federal government, state government, local police, have been looking at a variety of different aspects of these attacks and different aspects of the bomb themselves to figure out, again, whether they're created by the same person. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds as to any one particular facet, just because the situation is, has been very dynamic and likely will remain that way. But I think the bottom line of all of this is, we really saw incredible police work from across a variety of agencies at different levels of our government coming together, large numbers of them working together, doing very, very, very quick investigative work with a real clear sense of mission and a sense of purpose, that this needs to be solved as quickly as humanly possible.
Of course, because this is, as you said, it's so unusual and so predatory that and the randomness of it just made it such a huge public danger that it needed to be solved as fast as possible, because clearly this person was on a very rapid pace in setting these bombs. It almost seemed to be picking up. And so I cannot commend highly enough the work of law enforcement to bring this to an end. And Mike, we got about 30 seconds left. Any final thoughts that you want to leave us with on this?
Once again, thank you and your listeners for your prayers. Do keep the residents of Austin in your prayers as we continue to work to get to the bottom of this, and our law enforcement officials, keep them in your prayers as well, as they've been working so hard to continue through this next chapter of the investigation to get to the bottom of this and try through this experience to figure out ways in which we can prevent this from ever happening again here in Austin, across Texas, and across our great country.
Mike Toth, Special Counsel on Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's executive team, also a major in the U.S. Marine Corps. Thank you for your service on both of those items. Great talking with you today. When we come back, we'll be talking with